Hello again. The European Union Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell says one cannot imagine that millions of tons of wheat remain blocked in Ukraine while the rest of the world is suffering hunger, referring to Russia's blockade of millions of tons of Ukrainian grain, an action he's described as a real war crime. He said this as foreign ministers meet to discuss that crisis. Mr. Borrell calls on Russia to deblockade the Ukrainian ports. He is only being re-echoing a demand by Western nations that Russia stop blockading Ukraine's Black Sea ports and allow vast stores of grain to reach world markets. The blockade has sparked warnings that tens of millions of people are at risk of famine and food prices are soaring. He says that Russia should be accountable if it keeps blocking the export of vitally needed grain from Ukraine. In the meantime, Ukrainian farmers are said to be facing a crisis as new grain harvests are adding to already existing stockpiles blocked from exports as a result of the war in Ukraine. Vast fields of wheat outside of Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, are almost ready for harvest, and market watchers say they should be helping to feed the world. Instead, the fields are presenting farmers with major headaches. Some of Ukraine's largest agricultural enterprises, such as Harv East, are complaining. With 3/4 of Harv East's agricultural land now under Russian control and exports of its previous harvest still disrupted, the business is struggling.
We still have a huge store, a huge amount of grain which is still not exported, and in a month we'll have new harvest of winter wheat and rapes, and it is a huge problem at the moment.
We could reach the maximum of up to 2 million tons per month by these routes. It's only not more than half of the possibility of the sea. So we could cover 40–50% only of what we need.
The biggest problem is that agriculture producer who is not able to sell grain now doesn't have money to buy, because all credit programs from international suppliers are stopped right now, and we don't have enough to seed. So next year I expect it will be much worse than this year.
Russia's been answering back European nations, saying they have no one else to blame but themselves for the crisis in the gas market as well, demanding that gas turbines used by the Nord Stream 1 pipeline be returned. Russia's state-controlled gas firm Gazprom cut capacity along Nord Stream 1 last week, citing the delayed return of equipment currently being serviced by Germany's Siemens Energy in Canada. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters that Russia has gas to supply, but the equipment should be sent back first, adding that the recent crisis was of a man-made nature created by Europe. Russian gas flows to Germany through the Nord Stream 1 pipeline, the main route supplying Europe's biggest economy, where still running at about 40% capacity as of today, even though they had edged up from the start of last week. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and the UK's Foreign Secretary Liz Truss have both addressed leaders at a 3 Seas Initiative summit in Latvia. Speaking via video link, Mr. Blinken said the war in Ukraine had underscored the importance of strong transportation infrastructure, while Ms. Truss told the summit that Russian President Vladimir Putin is weaponizing hunger and Russian energy. The 3 Seas Initiative brings together 12 European Union member states located between the Adriatic, Baltic and Black Seas and aims to boost economic ties and enhance energy, transport and digital links among countries.
That ranges from Russia.
Greater energy independence will make member states less vulnerable to the Kremlin's coercion. It will deprive the Russian government of massive resources that's used to help bankroll its attack on the independence of Ukraine, not to mention several other countries in recent years. President Putin's war of choice has highlighted the critical importance of strong transportation infrastructure. The region's roads, rails, and airfields have been used by NATO to move personnel and equipment in order to reinforce the alliance's eastern flank. They've been used to get life-saving humanitarian and security assistance into Ukraine and to get nearly 6 million civilians out of Ukraine, most of whom have found refuge and remarkable generosity in your countries.
In his appalling hybrid war, he's trying to hold us all to ransom by weaponizing hunger and Russian energy. He's gambling that the free world will tire in the face of his aggression. We are not tired, and we can never tire in defense of freedom and democracy. And we will show that by doing everything possible to ensure that Ukraine prevails. For too long, countries have used their heft to coerce and exert control. That ranges from Russia with oil and gas to China with technology and strings-attached debt. It's imperative we strengthen our economic security by deepening our trade, sharing our expertise in science, and stepping up to provide honest and reliable investment.
Well, back on the ground, Russia is claiming its long-distance sea-based missiles destroyed a command post of Ukrainian troops, killing more than 50 generals and officers, while Ukraine insists the situation in Severodonetsk is difficult, but it's manageable. According to Russia's Defense Ministry spokesperson Igor Konashinov, Russian forces continue launching attacks at military facilities located in Ukraine. He says caliber high-precision long-distance sea-based missiles were launched at a command post of the Ukrainian troops near the village of Shirokaya Dacha in one of the regions. He says the attacks have resulted in eliminating more than 50 generals and officers of the Ukrainian armed forces, including those of the general staff and airborne assault troops and units that operate towards Nikolaev and Zaporizhzhia. Russian news agency RIA Novosti quoted the Luhansk armed forces as saying that Ukrainian troops trapped in the Azot chemical plant in Severodonetsk are still resisting, but they also expressed the willingness to negotiate. From the Ukrainian side, however, according to reports by the Ukraine National News Agency on Sunday, an advisor of Ukrainian Internal Minister Denis Monastisky said the situation on the eastern front of Ukraine is difficult, especially in the direction of Severodonetsk, but the situation is still under control. Let's talk to the VOA's Anna Chennikova, who joins us from Kyiv. Anna, great to see you. What are we understanding about the pattern of Russian attacks in Ukraine? There seems to be a concentration of bombardments on smaller towns and cities before extending, to the entire regions. You think this is a strategy of the Russian president, or are the troops just carrying out the attacks based on the importance of those towns and cities to Ukraine?
Hello. Well, I should say that this is not basically other way for Russian forces to, advance, because this is quite a difficult region, and the defense of Ukrainian forces is very high and very high quality. Despite any, troubles with the amount of artillery and so on and so forth, but still we can clearly see that defense is strong, and we know that the front line is basically, it's kind of, is shaping in the borders. So we can clearly see where the border so far for the moment is lying. The border at the front line. So it's just, difficult for the Russian forces to advance without first taking, villages and little towns, because it's just no other way. So I think this is a strategy. If answering this question, yes, probably this strategy. But again, we have to understand that this strategy is just, it's not only because of the, certain military decisions, but also because of all these, logistic points that Russia has to consider, and very big time because of the high level of defense by Ukrainian forces. And this is basically what we see along the front line, not only in Donbas region, but also in the south. And we used to see, and kind of continue to see in the north part when some attacks continue. So, but of course, mostly at the Donbas.
Yeah. And the rest of the world right now is very concerned about those grains that have been prepared for exports not being able to leave Ukraine. Last time we spoke about this, you said Ukraine had enough to feed its populations. The problem was getting ready grains that were supposed to be out of the country, sold to other parts, sent to other parts of the world. But because of the Russian blockade, the Russian forces are taking over the ports, and this is quite impossible. But what is Ukraine helping to do to remedy the situation as, we await probably international intervention? You heard some of the European leaders imploring on the Russian president to remove the blockade so that grain exports can leave Ukraine and the rest of the world can prevent hunger.
Yeah, we should look at this situation from two sides. So first side is the grains which are blockaded the Black Sea, and here we should understand that Ukraine is ready to export anytime, but Ukraine needs guarantees that Russia would not use this export corridor to attack, because this is quite a huge danger of that. And we know, well, for Ukraine, Ukraine do not trust Russia. So Ukraine do not trust when Russia say that, we're not going to attack, we're not going to do anything, just provide this corridor. So Ukraine is asking for defense from the third countries in particular as well, and for the guarantees, basically military guarantees, which would include except of defense from the third party, or at least military control of the third party, but also military, certain military imports to Ukraine, supplies which Ukraine could use in case this corridor is used by Russia for another attack. Because here we're talking about Odessa region in particular, so it is, of course, it's strategic, and of course, we can expect that Russia would do everything possible to actually use it for, certain provocations, or even as as an attack strategy. So, and this is the main point, and how it looks, that this is the main point of negotiation for the moment. So Ukraine is ready to export, but Ukraine needs this guarantee. And the second side of this question, we should look at those grains that are actually exporting, but they're exporting in different ways. So there are two ways, either vehicle exporting or railway. So in terms of vehicle, it has no capacity to, cover a lot of percentage of export by sea. But if we look at the railway, it's its capacity a little bit more. But again, of course, it cannot cover 100% of the sea exports. However, Ukraine is doing everything possible to, well, at least this is what authorities are announcing and reporting on, that Ukraine is doing everything possible to, increase this railway exports. And what we know for the moment, that Lithuania and Poland are involved in this export, and Ukraine is looking for Baltic countries also to join, other Baltic countries to join. So the problem here, and difficulty, not even a problem, but difficulty here is that railway in Lithuania and Ukraine are similar, but railway in Poland, for example, are different as European railway. So there is this, difficulty, and of course cost, additional cost, because the carrier should be changed, or there is other ways. So it's just that railways are not the same. But again, Ukraine is working on this, and as we know from the official announcements by the authorities, that Ukraine is looking at the implementing the railway reform. Of course, it will take time. Of course, it's a long-term perspective, but still, Ukraine wants to modernize its railway, so it is the same as European, and then it would be much more easier, to do this export by railway. But again, as we understand, of course, this year, grains have been hard. So we have already certain, amount of harvest grains for export. What's going to happen next year? Because, of course, there are difficulties of, implementing all this procedure to actually harvest grains next year. So this is another question. But, it looks like this is one of the top priorities questions remains for the moment, and a lot of European countries and the US are also concerned and are trying to, resolve this problem. So really, we hope that this would be resolved as soon as possible, because of course a lot of countries and a lot of people are suffering, and this is the worst.
Anna, let's look at gas, and I know that Ukraine has gotten, or rather usually gets a large supply quantity from Russia. So how has Ukraine coped, with gas imports during this time?
Well, we know that there are certain gas storages and certain gas, Ukrainian gas, certain capacity that Ukraine has to cover its needs. Also, there are European countries that start to export gas to Ukraine. Of course, we cannot. So it's different amount, but what we hear from the officials that for the moment this should be okay at least for the next winter. We cannot, we don't have deep analysis or deep, let's say, deep discussion of this question yet. But of course, this is quite a problematic also area, and of course, closer to winter. And actually, it's it's almost middle of summer already. So definitely, Ukraine would consider this question as another priority question for the winter season. And soon, I think that this question would be discussed more. But for the moment, what we see that Ukraine would use its own gas, and also certain European experts from European countries. So yeah, this is the situation for the moment, and of course, it's it's difficult logistically and it's difficult in general. But well, we'll see. For the moment, this is what we have.
Yeah, and over the weekend, the EU Commission recommended Ukraine be given candidacy status in the EU. What would that mean for Ukrainians who are listening, to a piece of news like that?
Well, it's huge. It's really huge for Ukraine. It's incredibly positive, and for Ukrainians in general, this is first of all a sign of extreme support from European countries, from the EU, from European partners. It's encouragement. Secondly, it's definitely a huge encouragement for Ukrainians to continue to fight, because, of course, Ukrainians are protecting not only its own borders but also the borders of the free world, and this is very true. And protecting European values and European security is it's a very, very big deal. So this decision is definitely it's extremely important, and also of course important because this creates this certain roadmap for Ukraine in terms of reforms, in terms of economic growth, economic and human rights reforms, all different kind of that. So it's extremely important also for this particular, political side, that Ukraine is basically has this, certain roadmap to follow, and we can already see that certain, laws are introduced in the parliament, and both are voting in the parliament, and we can definitely see the connection between these laws which are voting and this decision. So right. Ukrainians are extremely positive about that.
Anna, thank you so much for being with us today, and do stay safe.